Yes, and we talk a lot of college football, of course, on this show on the JohnsonRVCenter.com hotline right now. Andy Staples of The Athletic joins us now at Andy_Staples on Twitter. Hello, Andy. How are you this morning?
I am doing great. How are y'all doing?
Doing fantastic. Thanks a lot. Let's talk about your backyard there. The Florida spring game was last night, and if you watch that, it doesn't seem that there is any question who will be the starting quarterback for Billy Napier.
Yeah, I think they made that pretty clear. Anthony Richardson was with the ones playing against the number one defense, lit up the number one defense. Jack Miller, the transfer from Ohio State, played with the twos, had some trouble toward the end there. He had a red zone interception. So it looks like that's pretty firmed up. And I think that's probably the way things were going in. I think this new staff understood, hey, when you saw Richardson, I think he tweeted, scared money don't make money, basically right after Billy Napier was hired. I think that was an acknowledgement that, hey, I'm in with you guys. You guys are in with me. I'm staying. Let's do this. And we'll see what happens with Anthony Richardson. But you watched, at times last season when he did get in, there were flashes where you think, okay, this guy could be really good. He's very, very big. He's 6'5", 235, 240, can run. Throws the ball with ease, but not all, we weren't sure if it was always going to be the most accurate or where it was supposed to be. It looked fairly accurate last night. I think he was 15 of 17 in the first half and a lot of RPO stuff they were doing. Now, look, defense was kind of vanilla. I've heard there were some scrimmages where the defense was not so vanilla that the completions were a little harder to come by. So we'll see what happens with that offense. I think it's going to be even more interesting. Like they've got the quarterback thing set, but who will be catching those passes? Who will be playing linebacker for them? These are things that might be decided more out of the transfer portal here in the next month or so than what we saw in spring practice.
So if I asked you who gets to an SEC championship game first, Billy Napier or Jimbo Fisher?
Ooh. I think Jimbo Fisher probably, you'd have to answer that one, because if the quarterback thing hits at Texas A&M, conceivably they could be in an SEC championship game as early as this year. I mean, they beat Alabama last year. They should be theoretically better than they were last year. Now, look, Alabama is much older, is probably the best team in the country right now, but Texas A&M has the talent to play with anybody. What Texas A&M needs is they need to hit on the quarterback, because you think about it, their two most successful seasons of the SEC are Johnny Manziel's Heisman year and then Kellen Mond's fourth year as the starter, where you had an above-average quarterback who was very knowledgeable about the offense, who had a lot of talent around him, and they were able to use that. We'll see what happens this year. They've got Haynes King, who was supposed to be the guy last year. Max Johnson, who I thought at times at LSU looked great. And, then you've got the freshman Connor Wegman, who has gotten, has played some, and in spring they used him a little bit. So there's a chance he could be competing. And I think Texas A&M is further along than just about anybody other than Alabama and Georgia.
Andy Staples is with us. You read him in The Athletic. We have him linked often in our Next Round live morning rounds of our top links every day. Not just an SEC guy. We talk with him a lot about the SEC, but writes about all of college football and several other things right there at The Athletic. If I asked you, Andy, you just pick a team that could come out of nowhere and make the college football playoffs this year. There's been a lot of people talking about, FPIs this week and win totals and all of that. And
you haven't heard me talking about that. That strikes me as we're gonna create a computer algorithm that produces the most idiotic results, so that people will talk about them on radio shows.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. That's exactly what our segment was. If you've got Texas and Auburn in your top 10, it should be thrown away. But is there a team?
I didn't even know about that. I was on a show in New York, and the host read the thing to me, and I just laughed out loud when he said Texas.
Right. So off the beaten path, or a team that's a dark horse, however you want to phrase it, that could get into a college football conversation, playoff conversation this year. I'm maybe like Michigan, definitely like Cincinnati. Is there a team out there that could challenge the Ohio State, the Alabama, the Georgia, the Texas A&M, the Clemsons this year?
Maybe Utah.
Wow.
I mean, they won the Pac-12 last year. They open at Florida. It's one of those things that if they win, convincingly, and I wouldn't be shocked if they're favored in that game by the time the game comes around. If they could win the Pac-12 again, they could potentially crash the playoff. Oregon, I think people have sort of written off because they had a coaching change, but this was the year that Mario Cristobal was pointing toward as having his best roster there. And now he goes to Miami and Dan Lanning takes over. Dan Lanning knows how to coach a good roster. I mean, he was coaching the defense at Georgia last year, for goodness sake. So that's another one. So the Pac-12, which has not produced a playoff team since 2016, I think if either Utah or Oregon, and those are the two teams I would peg as the potential champs out of that league, either one of those could be a playoff team that maybe we're not talking about as much now.
Andy Staples is with us. Go follow Andy on Twitter at Andy_Staples. Subscribe to The Athletic. Read his work there. Hear him on SiriusXM. And go get his podcast. Same place you get ours. The Andy Staples Show. The Andy Staples Show podcast. Football, food, all the great stuff that we love here. How much do you think, because the Big 12 feels a little wide open, more than many conferences, how much do you feel JT Daniels changes that for West Virginia?
Not at all. I think the Big 12 feels less wide open. It feels like Oklahoma will be back as the champ of the Big 12. West Virginia gets better with JT Daniels, but unfortunately, teams have been picking off West Virginia's best players via the transfer portal. I know Neil Brown pretty upset about it. Feels like there's been some tampering going on, and he's frustrated. But there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you have a chance to go to what you perceive as a better program, you're gonna take it. I think in the Big 12, if Texas can ever get off the schneid, it would be great, and it would be good for college football if Texas would be good again. But at this point, with them coming off a 5-7 season, losing to Kansas, I'm done predicting that they'll be back. They got to actually show it. And they play Alabama week 2. So we'll have a pretty good sense of where they're at. But, everybody assumes that Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma means Oklahoma's going to suddenly stink. I don't think that's the case. They got Dylan Gabriel as a transfer, who was an excellent quarterback at UCF. He was hurt most of the last season, so didn't get to play. He's reunited with Jeff Lebby, who was his OC his freshman year at UCF, who was the OC at Ole Miss the last 2 years. I think they're gonna score a lot of points at Oklahoma. And with Brent Venables running the defense is going to be better. So that's the issue there. And then you've got Baylor coming off the Big 12 championship. I think they're still going to be pretty good. They have two quarterbacks who can play. They play really good defense. The Big 12 sort of changed. Like, everybody still thinks of it as this wide open, everybody runs the air raid league. It's not like that anymore. Iowa State's defense, which was kind of built to stop those teams, everybody in the country has tried to copy that. And then Baylor comes in, Dave Aranda comes from LSU, takes over there, and they play fantastic defense. Look, not the same way that Iowa State does, but they play defense very well. Jim Knowles had a great defense at Oklahoma State last year. That's why Ohio State hired him to fix their defense. So I still think, Oklahoma, Baylor, we'll see if Oklahoma State can keep that up with Jim Knowles gone. But just as I struggle to say Texas will be back at any point until I actually see it, I'm not going to write off Mike Gundy until I see them actually fall off, because they're always pretty good, and then sometimes they're really good.
In 3 years, who will be the alpha in the state of Florida?
That is a great question, because I think when Billy Napier got hired, it was, okay, this is a guy who understands what Nick Saban does, what Kirby Smart does, and he's going to do something very similar. And if it works, then Florida is going to look more similar to Alabama and Georgia. But then Miami goes and hires Mario Cristobal and says, not only are we hiring Mario Cristobal, we're going to invest in football the way Clemson invests in football at the top of the ACC and the way all these SEC schools invest in football. And if that's really the case, if they really do plan to do that, and judging by the staff they've hired, they do, then Miami could be that team. Because Mario Cristobal, I imagine the conversations he had with Miami brass were almost identical to the conversations that Billy Napier had with Florida brass. They came through the same Nick Saban system. Now, Mario Cristobal had been a head coach before, so he had some of his own ideas, but he merged them. Like, I know for a fact that Mario Cristobal, when he got or when he was the interim head coach at Oregon and Rob Mullins, the athletic director, interviewed him to become the full-time head coach, he basically slapped down the organizational charts from Alabama and Georgia and said, I need this. If you really want this to work, give me this. And Oregon went to work on trying to do that. They weren't there. I know everybody assumes that Phil Knight just writes a check. It doesn't work that way. So they didn't have that level of investment yet. Miami seems to be promising that level of investment. So that's going to be a wild race to watch as Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal try to build that up. I'd probably lean toward Cristobal just because he's more familiar with the environment that he's just walked into, and he's been a head coach in that city before. He was FIU's head coach and was pretty good there, but also because he's built a program and a roster to win a conference before. So, and I know that Billy Napier has won the Sun Belt, but Mario Cristobal won the Pac-12 a couple times at Oregon, has the best, left the best roster behind for Dan Lanning. I would think just his experience advantage gives him the edge there.
This is totally a self-serving question for me, but I get asked often, when is Oklahoma and Texas going to actually start playing SEC football? Give me a good answer that I can start telling people.
I don't know that I have a good answer because, usually there'll be what people say to the public, what they say to the media, and then what they really feel. And, I thought we'd get that with them, that they'd say, yeah, well, we can't leave until June 30th, 2025, because that's when the Big 12 grant of rights runs out. And that's what they'd say publicly, but then privately they'd be like, yeah, we're going to be there in 2023, 2024. Don't even worry about it. They're not saying that. Nobody's saying that. And maybe they're still working on it. I think with the Big 12 changing commissioners and working on its new TV deal and doing all this stuff, there is a possibility that reasonable people could come to a reasonable dollar figure that might allow them to leave earlier, but they've got to get to that point. And this is what's interesting because, you'll hear people in the Big 12 say, well, they can't leave because they would owe this much money. And it's a lot of money if they were to leave, because you'd essentially have to buy your broadcast rights back from the Big 12. And I don't think they're going to do that. I think what they've got to figure out, and what the Big 12 has to figure out, and what Oklahoma and Texas need to decide is there a way that the Big 12 can make $1 more than it would make if Oklahoma and Texas stay until June 30th, 2025. And if they can make $1 more or $5 million a school more, or however you want to play it, then you let them go early. Because otherwise you're just keeping them out of spite. Why would you cost yourself money? But if there's not a way to figure out how to make $1 more, and if you're Oklahoma and Texas, there's not a way to do it without a massive cash outlay, you just stay there and you come to the SEC in 2025.
When we have great minds like Andy Staples of The Athletic on, we like to ask them some of our hard-hitting sports take poll questions that we've had this week.
Ready.
Pancakes or waffles for breakfast?
It always depends on the mood, but I think if I had to guess which I'm in the mood for more often, I would go pancakes.
Okay. Wow. Deviled eggs, like them or no?
Nope. I like eggs in almost every form, but deviled and hard boiled, can't handle the smell, just gets me.
Yeah, it is a rough smell.
Favorite regional barbecue sauce? Do you like the tomato-based, southern-based, vinegar-based, mustard-based?
I will preface this by saying that properly cooked barbecue requires no sauce.
If you followed Andy closely, you knew that answer was coming, Jim.
Yeah,
Maybe I was setting him up
though.
Maybe I was setting you up for that answer.
Yeah, but that's not the answer. I do have a preferred sauce. So I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, spent the first 7 years of my life there. until we moved to Florida, I had no idea that mustard-based barbecue sauce is considered weird by everyone else.
Yeah, Maurice's,
I thought
right?
that was just normal.
Maurice's in Colombia. That's
No,
the
not Maurice's.
Is that not the go?
Oh.
Hang on. Which
No,
one?
Maurice is a horrible human and does not need to be celebrated or his
Wow.
I know
his
nothing
descendants don't need to be paid in any way.
I know nothing about him, but that's the mustard base.
He's a bad guy. But the mustard-based bar, like Rush's, was the chain of drive-through barbecue when I was a kid, and it's still there. But I just assumed that that's how everyone ate pulled pork sandwiches, like mustard-based barbecue slathered into the pork sandwich. And I still, like, if I make it at home, I put mustard-based sauce on it.
Interesting. I like mustard-based sauce.
I do
It's
too.
really good.
I do
yeah.
too.
So the Cadbury egg and or the Peep.
So I hate Peeps.
I do too.
I prefer the Cadbury's mini egg to the Cadbury's cream egg. Cadbury's mini egg is my favorite Easter candy, bar none. But I have come around on the Cadbury's cream egg as a delicacy, like a once a year delicacy. But I hate Peeps with the fire of 1,000 suns.
Yeah, I'm with.
I think I'm the
Andy
only
on that one.
person that liked Peeps growing up. I don't like them anymore.
my
They're too
little
sweet,
one-
but as a kid, I loved
My
them.
little one loves them. I
Everyone
hate the
in my
texture.
family loves
Yeah.
Peeps, and they think I am a complete psychopath for hating them.
hate the texture. You
Yeah,
bite it
I'm not a big marshmallow guy. Like if you ask me what my favorite marshmallows are, it's the ones in Lucky Charms. Like
Yeah, I
those,
agree. The
that's
hard
the
ones, yeah.
texture I want in my
Those aren't
marshmallows.
marshmallows. I don't know what the hell they are.
Those are freeze-dried marshmallows.
Yeah, freeze dried.
That's right.
But it's that kind of creativity that got us to the moon back in the 60s. That's what
That's
happened.
exactly right. with less technology than you have in your phone.
Andy, thank you so much for the time. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, guys.
All right,
See you,
take
Andy.
care. Andy Staples with us. Go follow him on Twitter at Andy_Staples. Read him in The Athletic. He was with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.